Hello, and welcome to Autism Start Here, What Families Need to Know. This is the first of a three-part webinar series brought to you by Autism New Jersey and the Department of Human Services Office on Autism. My name is Elizabeth Newman, and I'm the Education and Training Manager at Autism New Jersey. So we're going to start this first part with just some general information on what a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder entails, what that means for the individual. So first off, autism is a neurological disorder, so it affects the person's neurology, which is their brain, nervous system, how they process information. The current diagnosis is ASD, or Autism Spectrum Disorder. It's important to stress the term spectrum because that indicates that it's a very wide range. So two individuals with the same diagnosis of ASD could be exhibiting different specific behaviors and challenges and strengths. However, they're always going to fall within these two areas. So autism entails impaired social interaction and communication, how we interact with other people, and restricted repetitive behavior patterns. As I said, this is the current diagnosis as of 2013. Previously, there were other categories of autism or autistic disorder, Asperger's disorder, and pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, or PDD-NOS. So you may see those terms in reading or paperwork or files or anything like that, but going forward, the new diagnosis is autism spectrum disorder, and it currently affects 1 to 2% of individuals, which comes to 1 in 68 nationwide, currently 1 in 45 in New Jersey. So a little bit more specifics about the diagnostic criteria. So in the social communication and interaction area, we're looking for challenges in all three of these areas listed. Social emotional reciprocity is the give and take and understanding of an interaction with another person. So understanding that they have different perspectives and points of view, having conversation, all of the back and forth that entails. And in addition to challenges with language and communication as far as vocabulary that people are using, many individuals with autism are going to have difficulty understanding nonverbal communication as well. So all of the extra information that we pick up from each other in conversation and interactions, for example, tone of voice, body language, gestures, all of these things that indicate if the person is enjoying the interaction with us, if they are bored with it, if they are angry, if they are laughing at us versus laughing with us. All of those things that we pick up from the subtle nonverbal cues, many times an individual with autism will miss those without being specifically taught how to look for and understand those and respond. And then developing and maintaining relationships appropriate to their developmental level because of these challenges in understanding the social environment. So a story that may help understand the terminology that we're talking about here with social interactions. I was at a birthday party recently for a 3-year-old little boy with autism. We'll call him David. Excuse me. So I arrived at the party and looked for David. I wanted to give him his present and wish him a happy birthday. And his mom told me that all the kids were in the playroom, so I went to look for him. And there were, about 20 kids running and playing at the party, all in this small playroom. And it took me a while to find David. He was sitting in the center of the room, completely focused on his little iPod game that he was playing, his little technological device there. And all the other children were literally running and screaming and playing and laughing right around him. And you would have thought that perhaps he wasn't aware of that because he was so completely absorbed in the game that he was interested in. So that struck me for two reasons. The first was that most individuals, when they see another group of people having a good time, they'll want to join in with that because they understand that it will likely be a good time for them as well. And the flip side of that was that he completely seemed to think that his iPod game was the best thing ever. It was completely fascinating to him. And again, most individuals, when they have something they're very excited about, they'll want to share that with someone else, to show them what they're doing and what they're playing and how cool it is. So he missed out on the social interaction piece both ways, both joining in with the rest of the people and sharing what he found exciting. So that kind of helps me understand the reciprocity in these terms. The other diagnostic area is in restricted and repetitive behavior patterns. So you might see this across many different areas of the child's life. The most obvious from an outward point of view is you may see that they rock or pace or move their hands back and forth, their arms, their fingers, anything like that that's a physical motion that you see over and over again. You may hear this as well if they either repeat a certain phrase over and over again or a certain story, or if they are nonverbal, they may even make a certain sound over and over again. But it also can affect their cognitively, as well. So not just do we see the repetitiveness in their physical movements and their talk, but they may have a very strong tie to their routine and really have difficulty when their routine is off. So all of the things that pop up in our daily life, we have a snow day, mom's on a business trip, it's a weekend, it's a holiday, anything like that that throws our routine off, they may have great trouble adapting to that and going on and having that flexibility that the rest of us usually would have. Another area that you might see the repetitive patterns is if they have a very strong interest in a certain area. So they may be completely fascinated by whether it's space or trains or their favorite football team or something like that. We all have our favorite interests and preferences, and that's great, but many times in autism, it will be to the exclusion of other things. So if they can't focus on their lessons and their schoolwork and interacting with others and having conversations and activities related to different topics because they're so absorbed in the one that's their preference, that's when it can be a challenge. Okay, they may also have different reactions to the sensory environment. So, for example, they may have trouble with loud noises or crowds or certain types of touch or anything like that. So all of the things that we're talking about today as challenges inherent in autism can be addressed and taught through experts in the field. But we just want to understand where they're coming from with these challenges. So it's social interactions and restricted repetitive behavior patterns. Another term that you may hear with reference to the repetitive behaviors is perseveration. So just a few examples, like I was speaking of before, of things they may do over and over again. So that's perseveration. One thing to point out that is unique to autism compared to other special needs is that their development is not just delayed by several years. So for example, when I was teaching, sometimes if I had a new student in my class, either the parent or a former teacher or someone would say, okay, well, he's 10 years old, but he's about at the level of a 6-year-old. So I would know where to base my expectations and begin to interact effectively with the individual in the process of completing more thorough assessments and getting a better plan in place. You should not hear that with reference to someone with autism, because their skills and abilities are not just going to be like those of a younger child across the board, but they're going to be all over the map in the sense of they may have some skills that are at their age level. They might have some that are above their age level, but then they will also have others that are either slightly or significantly below. So it's very important to get thorough assessments done so we can understand what their strengths are and build upon those and prioritize the challenges as well. These are just a few examples of how you may see the social and restrictive behavior challenges in different individuals with autism. You'll see some of these characteristics are even opposite. You may have someone who's rather overactive or basically, has trouble sitting still and wants to always be on the move. And someone else with the same diagnosis of ASD could be rather passive and prefer to sit a lot and kind of be left alone. The last term there, echolalia, that refers to repeating words that you've heard from someone else. So it could be immediate if you tell your child, come sit down, and they repeat, come sit down, or a variation of it, they may say, sit, 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 sit. You may also hear it later, so there's delayed echolalia where they're repeating that phrase the next day. We also see delayed echolalia if they are repeating a line that they've heard in a song or a favorite book or a movie or TV show or something like that. Sometimes it can be used very effectively to communicate. My friend's daughter had a line from her favorite Disney movie that she would say over and over again, but there were times that she would say it and it was absolutely appropriate to the situation. So echolalia can be a step to language development, but we just need to be aware because it can also be that they're just reciting a favorite thing. So just to be on the alert for echolalia. Now, it's been studied and found that usually the diagnosis comes about when someone recognizes that the child is not meeting what are called developmental milestones. These are the skills that we're looking for children to meet at approximately different age levels. So, for example, smiling at people at the end of 4 months. Okay. It doesn't have to be exactly 4 months, but somewhere around that window, we're looking for that smiling reaction to seeing people. So that's one example of a developmental milestone. A lot more detail about this can be found at the CDC website that's indicated on your screen. They have detailed information on developmental milestones from 6 weeks to 6 years of age in different areas such as social skills, communication skills, motor skills. Across all different areas. The information is in English and Spanish, and I believe they have other languages available upon request. So initially, either the parent or maybe a pediatrician or a daycare provider or a teacher or someone recognizes that the child is not reaching these developmental milestones, and they would go for a screening from their general practitioner or pediatrician. The bullet at the bottom indicates that a small percentage, about a quarter to almost a third, were developing typically, in other words, meeting all these milestones on time. But then at about a year to a year and a half, then they regress and lose those skills. So that's something also to be aware of. But for the majority of those later diagnosed with ASD, they were later understood to have been behind all along. So we want, as soon as possible, to recognize this and bring the child in for screening so we can start to help as soon as possible. This slide indicates some red flags that if you're not seeing any of these behaviors by the times marked, then that is high priority. You would want to go right for a screening. So when you go to your pediatrician for the screening, it's basically just a questionnaire. So you would answer, I think it's about 20 questions or so regarding if your child does certain behaviors or not. Excuse me. Then the doctor would look at the screening results and see if it indicates enough of a concern to bring the child for a full evaluation by a specialist. So if so, it will likely be a neurologist, a developmental pediatrician, or a psychologist that would conduct autism-specific evaluations. And again, these just include extended observation of the child, sometimes setting up different scenarios and seeing how they respond, and extended interview with the caregiver as well to get a full picture of the child's strengths and needs. And I say child, it can be done at any age. All the information we're talking about with autism today does pertain to individuals of all ages. So just to wrap up with a few other features that may be in place as well as the autism diagnosis. The latest studies show that about 50% of those with ASD also qualify as having what's called an intellectual disability, and this means that their IQ is lower than would be average for their age. So it just affects how they learn, the rate at which they can learn. So again, this is split almost exactly in half. So some individuals with autism, so basically there's equal odds as to whether or not the individual with autism has intellectual disability as well or not. So that's something to keep in mind. Again, coming back to those thorough assessments being very important. About a third of those with ASD also develop seizures, so that's something we definitely want to have a medical plan in place to ensure safety. About half of parents surveyed have reported significant eating and sleeping challenges for their child with autism. We do know there's a higher incidence of digestive problems in those with autism, so that may be seen as them being a very picky eater or having very limited amount of foods that they will eat, or difficulty or resistance to eating altogether, or just different gastrointestinal problems when they eat. Excuse me. And sleeping difficulties as well. It could be that they have trouble falling asleep or get up very early, or just get up multiple times throughout the night. But this definitely affects quality of life and their ability to learn and focus and do everything else. So very important to address these eating and sleeping challenges as soon as possible. And about 50% of parents also have reported elopement, which is the term that's frequently used to describe when the child goes missing. So maybe they have wandered off, maybe they have taken off to somewhere that they want to go, but that's something that's of the utmost concern with regards to keeping them safe. So we want to be alert to that and put strategies in place to teach those safety skills. The causes of autism at this time are still generally unknown. We have identified some genetic components. So we would say that it is a genetic disorder, but it seems that it needs to be triggered by different environmental factors, and there's a lot of research still going on in both arenas, genetic and environmental. And just to clarify, scientists refer to environmental factors as anything outside of the individual's genetics. So in other words, whether it's something literally in the environment that they're exposed to, or something that happened during pregnancy, something that happened during delivery, anything outside of their actual DNA would be considered an environmental factor. Another resource that may be helpful to you is Autism Navigating Through the Maze, and this is on the Office on Autism's website as well. You can find it at this link. This will help provide more information about navigating service systems, and I believe part 2 of our webinar will cover that as well. At Autism New Jersey, we are also happy to help as well any way that we can, so please feel free to call us at 800-4-AUTISM at any time. Thank you very much for your participation, and I hope this helped.